All right, everyone, welcome to Deep Dives with Dogs. Today, we're going to talk about something a little bit mixed of historical and science fiction. And we're going to talk about people's beliefs that there are people living throughout history, people living on the moon or on Mars. This has been a conspiracy, obviously, for a long time. There's been a lot of thoughts that people have been living on other planets in our solar system. The ancients really believed that wholeheartedly in many regards. And they had reasons to, things to do with their gods or... Oh, boy. Put mayhem right in the middle of these two dummies. But, things to do with their gods or things that they've been told by their gods or by their ancestors, stuff like that. Obviously, there's a lot of course, theories today that people lived on Mars way back when. Obviously, there's no evidence of it, but there's one of those things of there's no evidence for it, but there's not necessarily evidence fully against it as well. It's just an impossible thing to know, realistically. But there have been, of course, big hoaxes as well of people saying they spotted people living on other planetoids or solar bodies. Not solar bodies, but planetoid bodies. 1835 actually is a good example. There's the big moon hoax, where there was a newspaper called, not necessarily a newspaper, but a news agency called The Sun in New York that said that British astronomer John Herschel saw beings, living things on the moon. A blue unicorn, bipedal beavers, and winged humans. Now, this isn't true. It was never true. It was a straight up hoax. They never retracted it. They just kind of like, yeah, this happened. This led to a lot of, obviously, a big boom in like, oh, hey, like, there's things on the moon. We got to look at this. And there was a big search for it. It would lead to a lot of sci-fi novels and things like that, with thoughts of, oh, people on the moon, that kind of stuff. But obviously, that's not true. Nothing's lived on the moon. It'd be kind of impossible for anything, especially like what was described, to be living on the moon. Let's just be honest. The moon doesn't have the best living conditions for people. But there's been other examples of people thinking that there was life on other celestial bodies. Mars has been a big one for a long time. Martians. And that goes back to even ancient times. Even ancient people believed that there was men on Mars, life on Mars. It's not that crazy to think, if we think about it, not with our modern understanding of Mars, but of the idea of how people would have saw planets in the past. If you're living on a planet, why wouldn't the planet next to you also have life? Why not? If we're living on one, why wouldn't there be one right next door? It's a pretty reasonable understanding, especially when you don't have visited the planet. You can't see it very well. You would think that there are people living on another planet. And yeah, Mars has always been, little Martians and others, individuals on the planet. But it's not true. Now, there is some evidence that maybe there was life on Mars. It used to have a more complete atmosphere, a magnetosphere, and there is ice on Mars. There's even underneath the surface large oceans, from what we've gathered. So in the past, it's not impossible to think that Mars did have life. Now, when any humans were alive, unlikely. It's been a long time since Mars had proper life-supporting capabilities. But another planet, and this one doesn't have as much theories, but it's also very possible, is Venus. Venus right now is basically a planet on fire, more or less, with how hot it is. But in the past, it's not impossible to think that Venus could have had life. Just a runaway greenhouse effect happened, and that led to Venus being like it is today. But realistically, if we wanted to actually live on another planet, Venus is the best option. Venus has a lot of things that Earth does, except it's a lot too hot. But there's places on Venus where you could live. So, once again, it's one of those things. Before the greenhouse runaway, could there have been life on Venus? Who knows? Venus is one of those planets it's impossible to know. Can't really get to the surface safely. It's hot. And also, anything that did live would have been burned off by the heat so long ago. So, just hard to know. And, people don't want to be alone in the galaxy. So it makes sense why these theories, especially throughout history, have been so prevalent, and even today. It's also statistically impossible for there not to be more life in the universe. So, hey, who knows? Maybe we'll find some again. But now you know.